Well, welcome back to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts today, Valentino Stoll, and I'm joined by Ayush. Ayush, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. I've been on the podcast a while, so hopefully frequent listeners would know. But yeah, quick intro. I'm the author of a book called The Rails and Hotwire Codex. I'm on the Bridgestone core team, and I talk a lot of crap about Ruby.
You just released another version of the book, didn't you?
Yeah, it's a minor update, just a whole bunch of continuity fixes that a very diligent reader sent me.
That book is so huge. I just imagine a minor update is really like a book in its own capacity.
Oh, fucking hell, you can say that again. Like that's what makes continuity so unbelievably hard. Like some of the mistakes that this reader sent me to like a piece of code that I'd written that I kind of modify like 3 chapters later, but I'd forgotten to backport the changes and stuff. It's like,
see, this is what I'm waiting AI to do, right? It's just like clean up all this nonsense work that has to happen, but like nobody really wants to do it, right? Like,
yeah, it's
like, why don't we have a reader bot and it's just like reads your book for you and it's like, okay, yeah, based on this latest stuff, you should update these things, right?
That would be very useful indeed.
So we were talking before the show, kind of like Rails 8 is on the way here. Everybody's at Rails World, and Ayush and I are feeling major FOMO right now. But we're just watching the stream come through of all of these incredible updates that are just getting pushed out and released and announced today. Some of them we already knew were coming, right? Some of them we didn't. Ayush, do you want to maybe mention your top highlights so far?
Yeah, so I mean, all I'm looking at is the Twitter feed, really, because we don't have any YouTube streams as yet. Although the keynote apparently will be up later today, which honestly, Ruby on Rails Foundation is bloody amazing turnaround time.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Have it out on the same day. But yes, the Rails 8, the highlights are authentication, prop shaft, the solid trifecta, which is solid cache, solid queue, solid cable, thruster, and Kamal 2. Which the thing that I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority, but the thing out of all of that I find least interesting is authentication, because I've always just built my own. I've never been a fan of Devise or anything like that. I just built my own, so I don't really care that Rails kind of has it, because I'll still just use the one I made myself.
Yeah, that's fair. You always prefer your own tools in the end.
Yeah, my ego is too big to let me use anything else.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I've seen, we've all kind of been preparing for this, I guess, solid trifecta that they're calling it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely makes me happy to see, more and more not have to get set up when you first start up a new app. There's nothing worse than configuring something when you just want to get going.
Yeah, completely. And I think just being able to drop the Redis dependency is something that's quite big. And I'm also, for like small indie apps, I think having the 3 solid libraries along with all the move towards SQLite is just gonna reduce the amount of complexity pretty significantly, because you don't need a database server anymore either. And you just you have one SQLite database for your actual database, you have another one for your cache, you have another one for your queue, and it's just creating files. It's not that hard.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the last leg of this is wrapping everything in WebAssembly so you could just deploy to, anywhere.
Yeah.
which I don't know will happen in our near term, but you know what? One thing I noticed from the feed, I was curious what you thought about. It's kind of what's coming in Rails 8.1,
Yeah.
which are the 3 bigger features that I feel like have been missing from Rails a lot, which is the action notifier, the search, and House MD, which I thought was funny, is a markdown editor.
Yeah, I love that name. So yeah, they announced House MD a while ago, and it's something I've kind of been keeping my eye on. But uh, I have a little bit of scar tissue here with tricks because it's a fairly fiddly editor to use. You can't extend it much. Um, they don't. Maybe recently their stance on it has changed, but they didn't seem particularly involved in trying to improve it or even like have community involvement. Like I remember I created a pull request that literally added an undocumented event to the README, and I think that pull request remained open up until I don't know, 2 or 3 years later on.
Oh my gosh.
It is literally just literally 2 lines in the README. So, and I know other people who've kind of tried to improve tricks or stuff like that, and just not really had much success working with the maintainers. So yeah, House MD, I'm just tempering my expectations a little bit because um, yeah, it's just I think they've obviously built what works for them, which is not always going to work for everyone else's use case, and I'd like the community to be able to improve it and just make it better. But whether that's going to be viable, we'll find out. But the other
Hey,
two,
you bring up a great point. That's actually one thing I've been a little bit concerned about with Rails, in that like it's a lot of, as things grow and get, some solid foundation framework wise, like the need for reducing bloat becomes ever greater. Especially as the number of maintainers doesn't really increase too much, in proportionality at least. So I
yeah,
do worry, like, right, like I've noticed not just with tricks, but other pieces of the framework, that very similar feedback, right? Like it's very long churn process for changes that really don't affect anything.
yeah,
To be honest. And so hopefully, with the Rails Foundation and everything like that, that is on the radar. That we can
um,
make sure that the maintainership at least stays up to date with the progress of the rest of the framework.
yeah. You'd hope so, but like I've read the kind of remit of the Rails Foundation, and open source isn't really one of those things. Like I see a lot on social media about, oh, why can't the Rails Foundation fund this gem or that gem or this maintainer? And I'm like, that's not, they never claimed that they would be doing any of that. Like if you read the initial announcement, that like open source doesn't feature really in their mission or whatever you want to call it. Like they'll focus on like improving documentation and stuff, which is something that's happening.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, funding open source is not one of the things they do, and for right or wrong, that's not something they've ever claimed to do. So
I
I
don't. Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, I don't know that they have to throw funding at it. More just like organizational, like, hey, like we have this increase in the code base, and you know, we need maintainers. Like the organizational stuff. I feel like that's where I was hoping that the foundation would add to, right? Is so that cases
Yeah,
like this where
true.
we have like only so many limited contributors that have like approval access to just merge something, right?
Yeah,
Which is good, both good and bad, but it's like definitely adds a bottleneck. And so I would like to see something where, like, I don't know, people can vote people into contributorship, right? Like where we can create a pipeline that just like makes this process easier, because like, to be honest, like somebody going through and just like approving a bunch of the documentation stuff, like that would be a huge help, and I
yeah,
know that that's somebody's probably already like working on that, but like every one of the Rails repos, like,
yeah. So that I think that's where there's a little bit of mismanagement. I think is because so the Rails core team is really good, and they have a really defined structure like core committers and the issues team. And with Rails, they're always on it. Like I've always got responses to any PRs pretty quickly in Rails. But then there's some stuff that's in Rails that kind of sits in this gray area, which is kind of in Rails, but not, which is like all the Hotwire libraries
yeah,
are, they're in Rails, but they kind of not because they're owned by 37 Signals. Tricks is another one because Tricks is action text is in Rails, but Tricks is in like Basecamp's organizations. It's like 37 Signals or whatever. So it's like, yeah, there are certain things that sit in this weird gray area, which is kind of in Rails, but kind of not. And I think that's where all the problems are happening.
Well, I gotta hand it to Shopify. They seem to have like at least solved that issue with Ruby itself, right? Like they had their own fork of Ruby for a while, like handling all of this stuff that they've been upstreaming over the years, for like copy on write and things like that. Uh, and I feel like they have had lots of repos that were basically versions of that
Yeah,
like made their way into the official right like
yeah,
realm. Um, so it's possible, right? Like 37 Signals is just another company, right? Like,
yep.
uh,
It's
I don't know.
completely possible. We'll just, yeah, it is a bit of frustration with, I know people who've contributed to Hotwire, especially at Marco Roth gave a great talk at a few conferences just about obviously all the good stuff in Hotwire, but some of his frustrations as well. And a lot of that was organizational. So we'll just have to see how this stuff evolves. And it's just my personal frustration is that like some of these things are in Rails as defaults, like tricks and stuff, but they aren't in control of the Rails core team. So that just creates a little bit of mismanagement, I think. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, the other two things that you mentioned for Rails 8.1 are things that I'm very much looking forward to. Like active record search is something that I think is gonna really simplify
That
matters. Like,
that is like the funniest thing, right? Because like the whole Rails like you know hype started off of a blog, which is
yeah,
like search is like kind of something you add to a blog, right? As like one of
yeah,
your primary features.
yeah,
Honestly, it's what you add to almost any any site that you make with Rails. So yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about that. I hope it's. I mean, if it's anything like all the other Rails, interfaces, it should be very straightforward. I don't know, are you hoping that it aligns with any particular, search gem that you've used in the past?
no, not really. So for my book, I wrote an entire chapter on search, and that's why actually I'm quite happy that it's now built into Rails. And I didn't really use a gem. I just used the full text search and trigram search features in Postgres, and then hand wrote ARL queries. It was a lot of this was academic because once you teach a reader how to do those things, and then you could your level of understanding just goes way up. So my I'm not really concerned about whether it aligns with a certain gem or not. The main thing is I just hope it has support for full text search and trigram search
Is
because
there
they are
full
different
text search?
strategies.
Is there full text search in SQLite?
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, I feel like that's something that once
Mm,
you realize it's there, you're like, why do I need other things?
exactly.
To a certain extent. I mean, until you start using it heavily, but if you
Yep.
just want to like expose a text column like to search on, it's like pretty great,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah. Like I think again for the vast majority of use cases, just your database search is probably good enough. Like I can only speak to Postgres because I've not used the full text search in other databases, but it's actually really good. It's only when you want to start like going quite advanced is when you need to reach for something like Elasticsearch. Like if the client I'm working with at the moment is it's kind of like a AI powered search engine for people and companies, kind of like a directory of people and companies. And we've used Elasticsearch for that because literally the core offering is a search engine, so we need something quite beefy. But that was probably the one of the very few exceptions when I would go reaching for something like Elasticsearch is when your core offering is literally search.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I feel like, you know, most Rails apps are like business related like where you'll have a CRM or like some classic solution that you're just trying to solve with like your custom data or things like that. And that, having a just quick full text search or and any deep, I imagine what active search will become will just be so great. Like just
Yeah.
just hook it up to a model or whatever it may be, like series of models. Like I could see it being pretty huge.
Yeah, I think it would really simplify matters. And yeah, I think it's one of those things that's been a bit of a long time coming, but I'm glad it's on its way now. And yeah, the action notifier is another one that is going to be cool because push notifications are just fiddly. That's it's just the nature of them. It is that they are just fiddly. And if my understanding of what the framework is correct, then it's going to handle sending notifications to web, iOS, and Android. So you don't need to worry about any of that on your own. Obviously, the web stuff is what kind of interests me the most because going forward, me personally, my focus is going to be completely on PWAs. Leaving the native stuff behind. Even the second edition of my book is not going to have any native stuff. I'm going to remove it all in favor of PWAs. So web push is something that I need to explore. I know you can do it now in Rails, but Action Notify would just make it easier.
Yeah, I hope they borrow from Chris Oliver's Notice gem. I've used that in the past, and
Yeah.
it's like very straightforward and doable.
Yeah. Yep. It is a very easy to use interface. I did take a lot of inspiration from it whenever I've built kind of notifications in apps. I've not reached for that library myself necessarily, again, just because I don't really like reaching for dependencies. I prefer building stuff myself because I don't know, I'm just wired that way. But it is a very solid library, and I kind of look to it for inspiration.
Yeah, it does. It does add to the list of gems that people will have to migrate away from, like
Yeah,
Visual or
yeah,
something. Uh, uh,
yeah. It's
that's
kind
a little
of
frustrating.
it's true. It's kind of like uh, just the way Rails goes, right? Eventually, stuff ends up in the platform, and then like because yeah, you had Carrier Wave and Paperclip for a number of years, and then active storage became a thing, and then everyone had to migrate.
Yeah,
It's just the way it goes. But I think I'm more looking forward to Rails 8.1 than 8, really. Because yeah, while I was, I think I honestly should put something in a swear jar every time I mention my book on this on this podcast. But
it's
but
a great book,
what?
by the way. Outlier Codex, check it out.
Rails and hotfirecodex.com. Go buy it
That's right.
now. But I had a like a second edition planned, right? For everything new, and that's going to be like a paid upgrade. But looking at everything that's come out, I think I might actually wait for Rails 8.1 because then I can cover active record search and action notifier, which are like key parts of um, any web application. And since I'm kind of standardizing around PWAs, it makes sense to wait for action notifier because I don't want to build my own system, which is I know going to be outdated very soon.
Yeah, on the topic of books, I saw Obi Fernandez posting an update to the Rails way, now the Rails 8 way.
Yeah, the Rails 8
That's,
way, I saw that as well.
I'm
Start me
excited.
there.
To be honest, I'll probably learn all the new Rails 8 features by reading that book.
Yeah, I mean that book's going to be solid, so it's going to be good. Quite a lot of good stuff coming down the pipeline. What are your feelings on Kamal? Have you used it? Do you have any opinions on it?
I'm interested in Kamal. I'm kind of waiting for it to just like mature a little more.
Hmm.
All the like the transitions of traffic as an example. Uh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of like shifting sands still, and just from like I don't personally use it every day, so like
Mm.
um, just from what I see, it seems to be like a lot of the infrastructure is changing around as they start to learn more and more the edge cases and configuration options and things like that. So I do have a couple of like Doku apps that I would like
Yeah.
to migrate eventually, but I'll probably wait till next year to be honest, just to like let Rails 8 like settle and
Yeah.
have everything more firmed up.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good way to go about it. I've kind of just been watching from afar as well with Kamal, largely because it's Docker based, and I don't understand Docker well enough to not be afraid of it as yet. So so yeah, it's probably just one of those things I need to look at some point. But like my one frustration with Docker and well even Kamal in general is that it adds this additional moving part of a Docker registry. Like if all I've got is a very simple indie app that runs on one box, I don't want to deal with excuse me, I don't want to have to deal with uh, the additional complexity of pushing to a Docker registry and then my server pulling from there. Like it's just me working on it on just by myself, running it on one box. Like why can't I build the Docker container locally and then just push that up to the server?
Yeah, you make a great point. Like, why have Docker if you have one server?
Yep,
uh,
that's another great point as well.
right. Uh, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's definitely like a foundational choice, right? Like, I think of it as like Legos, right? Like, where you have like, if you just build Legos on a table, like, yeah, that's fine. But you have like a sheet where you're like sticking the Legos to build your, thing. It's a lot easier to build it as it doesn't move around. And I
Mm.
don't know. I feel like it's kind of like that, as it's like laying the foundation for you to add more stuff that eventually you're going to need to add it.
Yep, yep.
I feel like the the probability of not extending what you have, if you actually make something that you use every day, it's like very low chance that you're not just going to add something new to your
Yep.
stack. uh, and so I like that it's there, right? Like it is like the modular framework for that aspect of things. um, but at the same time, I, Docker development is like, it definitely slows you down. Like there are edge cases that you can't even imagine from using platforms, right? Cross-platform use of like a single interface is like it never works out like smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why at some point I want to do just a little deep dive personally into what it what it takes to just deploy a Rails app to a Linux box with something like Caddy in front of it, and just see what if there's a way to kind of simplify that without Docker.
Yeah,
Uh, because yeah, I just don't need Docker. But the one big advantage of something like Kamal, I think, is if you want to sell like a one style product that like a web app that you just do a one off sale for. I've been thinking about this for like months. Before once was even a thing, this kind of idea was in my mind. There is absolutely no sane way to distribute uh, a web app without Docker. It's just this rabbit hole of complexity. Like it just gets you're telling a customer to kind of do too much. Like if I was selling a Rails app like that was a one-off sale, and without Dockerizing it, I would basically be selling only to other people that knew Rails. No one else would go anywhere near that.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, distribution of an application that's bundled up, like if you're not like creating an executable or something, right? Yeah, like how do you do that? I do like, we had Andy on about the Glimmer project, right? And I did like I like that kind of idea of like literally packaging something up as like a binary, and like that's how you. I mean, because that's a great way to ship things, right? Is like
Yeah.
okay, those cross-platform like distribution is like already set, established and pretty straightforward. And Glimmer is one of those frameworks that makes that process easy, right? And
Mm.
like the whole like Dragon Ruby toolkit for game distribution. Like I feel like all that's really missing, and I know that like Andy was mentioning that he's trying to work on that front end aspect of the Glimmer project. But yeah, that's what's missing is kind of like the web side of that distribution where we have like the browsers now, which I think the I thought the goal of the browser was to be that distribution platform.
Yep.
But it's like the competition between the browsers has just like stifled progress like so much. Like it's kind of remarkable
Yeah.
how people are just like okay with that. Like, yeah, we're just gonna like, no problem. Like all these browsers are competing, so like we're just not gonna have a distribution platform for, web.
Yep.
That's just crazy to me. Like
It is a bit mad.
yeah, I don't know. I was hopeful with like Travel Ruby or something like that we'd see maybe something a little more progress, but I guess it's hard to sell that, right? Like if
Yeah.
you um if your end users are all distributed, how do you deliver the best thing, right?
Yep. It's no simple problem. If it was simple, it would have probably been solved by now.
Although that does bring me to another announcement with the Turbo what is it?
Hotwire native.
Hotwire native.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we had oh, I'm blanking on his name now.
Joe.
Yeah, Joe. We had Joe on before a few times, I think.
Okay.
He was talking about Turbo Native and the progress that he was making there, and apparently has been collaborating right with 37 Signals to
Yeah.
make this happen, which is really exciting. Because I know the
Yeah.
last time I was messing around with that, it's like pretty decent. I mean, there's still like you still got to write some Objective C or not Objective C, but like
Swift.
Swift
Yeah.
uh, and Android, like small amount of code now.
Yeah.
But you
It's
still
true.
have to.
But I think it's the right approach that you still have. You have an Xcode project and Android Studio project. Your code base is still separate. I think that's a very good approach, and I spoke at length about this at a couple of conferences last year. So if you look up building turbo native apps with my name, you'll find my talk at friendly.rb last year about this. And I completely agree it's the right approach. And but honestly, like what they've done, it just seems more like a rebrand. And I think it is a rebrand for the better because having turbo native and Strada as separate things, it was just a little bit confusing, and they've just unified those under this Hotwire native umbrella now. So it's one thing, like both the native kind of worlds are just one thing, and the documentation is a lot better, which I believe Joe helped out with. And the other thing was, I think Joe also built a library called Turbo Navigator, which so a lot of like the native navigation stuff on iOS you have to build on your own. But on Android, it's kind of part of the platform. So Joe had built this library called Turbo Navigator, which kind of brought the same ergonomics to iOS as well, which now I believe is part of Hotwire Native. That does simplify life on iOS as well. So yeah, it's all just very good stuff. Stuff I'll personally remain quite blissfully ignorant of though, because I've had enough of native in my life. I don't want any more.
Yeah, and it's it's going to be hard to stay away from it with all this Apple Intelligence stuff now, even increasing the hype. And I imagine there's a Google version of that out there too. Drawing more and more people to their mobile devices.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I think PWAs, I hope just it just needs better marketing, I think. And it also needs like the big tech companies to kind of come on board with it, which is the harder part. Like, what I would really like to see is the ability to put a button on a website that says install to home screen, and you tap it and it just does it. Because like now, the best solution you can have is you can have that button and you can have instructions on what to do, which is usually like click a share button and then add to home screen or whatever. You can't automate that. There is no API to do that. But you can see why Apple and Android don't want to do that.
Why? Oh, we don't have to get into it.
Yeah, got something to do with green paper.
I will say, like, just taking a step back to the conference again, Rails World. I mean, it is packed. You see the audience in a lot of these photos, and it's kind of exciting to see, people all over the world coming together, making this stuff happen and shipping stuff. Um,
Mm.
it's you know, there's no way Rails could be dead with that crowd.
Oh yeah, Rails is just not the fashionable thing anymore. It's yeah. So I've been asked before, like, because I've only come to Rails in 2020. I was mobile developer before that, so like I've been asked like, did I find Rails to be some kind of like niche framework or something that was in the past when I got into it? And I'm like, no, I never thought that for 1 second. I always thought of it as a mature, solid piece of technology that just wasn't fashionable anymore. And I'm fairly cynical enough to not give a shit about the fashion aspect of tech. Like, I mean, you have Angular, you have React, these things just go and come in waves. And I'm like, just let me write HTML and CSS, like, and Ruby on the back end that generates HTML and CSS, and I'm happy.
Oh
Don't
yeah,
really care about anything else.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to it's hard to sell somebody focused on front end like a framework that they don't understand. Uh, and it's likewise the same way, right? Like I know a lot of front end people that are like very happy with Next.js or something like that, and they're very efficient in it, and it makes them productive. Like why would they switch to Rails? And maybe until they need like a file upload or something. No, I don't know. There are like some things in Rails that do just like they just work and they make things very easy. And so I feel like the more we can expose like what those things are and how easy it is, the more people will adapt to it for sure.
Yeah, completely. I mean, um, yeah, there's nothing to add to that.
So what's something I'm curious because you're kind of like all over the place in the stack. What's something from Rails that you use that like you've used in other frameworks that is just like unparalleled to using Rails with?
um, don't know. It's hard to pick just one because Rails is the only backend stack that I've ever used, so it's hard to kind of compare it to something else. Um, but like everything you kind of need to build a modern web app is kind of standardized in some way or the other. Like like when you look at other stacks, this is more anecdotal from when I go speaking to JavaScript people. It's that you kind of need to um, pull in stuff, plugins and things for basic things like file upload. You need to go look for a plugin for that. Authentication, you got to go look for a plugin for that. You yeah, you basically need to build a stack that Rails gives you already out of the box. Like if you're building a web application, all the pieces you need are already in Rails, which obviously makes it a bit of a behemoth. And when you need something very simple, it's not the right tool for the job for that reason. But for most modern web applications, you do need all that, and Rails just gives it to you.
Yeah, I agree there. I mean, it's a little tricky because like I'm still trying to find the right like front end magic, right? Like if I want to like I don't know, add some like UX flourishes using some, npm package or something. There's like kind of 8 different ways to integrate that into the Rails app. Uh, and so I mean I know that like, there is some hope in the pipeline coming.
Hmm.
Um, but it's still very much divided on how the best approach is. Like the standard is kind of still not firmed yet. Um, I don't know. What's your impression there on like integrating front end components that are external to the ecosystem?
It's yeah, a bit of can of worms. Like, so I quite like View Component, the library. I know there was some chatter to merge that with Rails. The last time I met Joel Hawksley, who's the leader of the project, which was 2022, summer 22 at Brighton Ruby, he still had ambitions of merging it into Rails. So that is one dependent. Like I don't reach for a lot of dependencies naturally for every app, but View Component is one of them. And I quite like that approach because it again focuses on generating HTML on the server, which is just like just the construct with which you generate it is like componentized, and you send that down to the browser. And then if you need like JavaScript components, I just use custom elements. Like they are absolutely amazing. It blows my mind that they're not more widely used than they are. um, they are just so useful. Like uh, last year when I was helping out with the Rails World conference website, I was mentoring the junior developer who built it, and we needed to put like a back to top button on the web page, which appears only when you've kind of scrolled down twice the height of the viewport. And this was a Jekyll app, so we didn't have a JavaScript pipeline, and I don't hate myself, which is why I didn't want to set one up. So we were limited to basically vanilla JavaScript. So like my first instinct would have been to reach for a stimulus controller, but I didn't really want to pull in JavaScript dependencies because we were just writing vanilla JavaScript without any kind of bundling or anything. So I just showed her how to use a custom element, and it was just so elegant and so simple. And it's just such a great solution to so many problems.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Joel Draper. I've
Uh,
been
Joel
following it.
uh, Joel Hawksley.
Oh, Joel Hawksley,
Joel Draper is the Flex guy.
right? Flex guy. It made me think of the Flex guy.
Ah, okay. Yeah, they're both
Yeah, I
called
mean, I love
Joel.
the view component stuff that Joel Huxley is working on is really impressive. I mean, there's always so much like coming out there too, and it it makes me think of Joel Draper, who is funny. They're both Joel working on similar things.
Yeah, yeah.
With the Flex repo, I mean, just saw. I've been following the FLECKS
Oh,
by
okay,
Joel
yeah,
Draper, which basically makes like a bidirectional, data coupled view component basically with Flex that you can like serve asynchronously over WebSockets to like get updates. Really cool stuff. Where you get kind of like the data coupled back end to the front end in a single component. It's like really neat. And to be honest, like the whole Phoenix Live View, like which has been out a long time, right?
yeah, yeah.
uh, I've been waiting for something like that in Rails for the longest time because I mean, we're close with Hotwire. I know that was like kind
Yeah.
of supposed to be the driver for that. It is still a little bit clunky, I think, with all the IDs and trying to manage what streams to what and what what file holds what update, right, and what gets executed where. It's still a little bit hard to follow. uh
Yeah, it is. I've not used live view, but live view is obviously purpose built for one thing, and
Right.
stuff like action cable and the broadcast system within Hotwire is just like a feature of a bigger thing.
Yeah,
So yeah, I guess that's why it feels a bit bolted on because it is.
it is. Yeah. That's funny. Uh, but I mean, I'm hopeful. Like, it's a it's funny that, like, Vue component as an example hasn't like kind of made its way into the Rails ecosystem, with its longevity, right?
Yeah,
And obviously there's some trepidation for a reason, right? Like, um, it does introduce kind of some DSL that you have to be familiar with, and it's not quite as Railsy as it could be. I guess it's more the Ruby way than the Rails way, which is kind of funny.
yeah, that's very true. I don't know exactly what the objections to getting it into Rails were, but yeah, that is probably likely one of them. Is that it just feels a bit different. I couldn't articulate exactly why.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, like, I remember, I haven't done Vue components in a while, but the last I did, it was like great encapsulation. You could test the changes that get made to your component. It's encapsulated perfectly, and when you mutate the props, the actual HTML that gets rendered gets changed in specific ways, and you don't have to
Yeah,
worry about it. It's all Ruby. I mean, there's a lot of appealing qualities of it. But yeah, I feel like it becomes the same like front end issue of, okay, well, how do you extend it? How do you like add these custom components or custom features, and then you end up tied into the DSL of the framework, and because it's its own framework.
yeah,
And I feel like Flex kind of has the same issues there too, right? Is if you wanted to create your own, element or something like that, or component, yeah, it's not exactly straightforward because you have to follow however the framework has it set up.
yeah,
Um, and all of these things go against what most front end people do. So I feel like the you know the you the Rails and Ruby like developer ecosystem that's full stack like slowly gets narrowed in as you get to like the front end. Like, it's very like it's been back end heavy for a long time.
yeah.
It's been shared, like it's getting wider, right? But like, I feel like even still that like the audience narrows quite a bit when you get like closer to the front end side of things. Um,
Yeah, it does. I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit old school. I don't really see a massive reason for there to be this demarcation between front end and back end. Like, sure, you might be better at one compared to the other, but I think if you're a web developer, you should just be able to do everything.
well, I think it comes in. It I'm torn, right? Like, I've been at a small organization where having full stack people is, very beneficial. And like, when you have fewer people, it's just easier to move faster if everybody kind of touches on all the same things.
Mm,
But in a bigger organization too, it's like kind of nice having people that just devote themselves to like making sure front end components work smoothly, right? Or like, once you get a design system in play, making sure that all the components are uniform across all of your applications, and making sure that like things is like it's a smooth experience for the user. UX is like on its own is probably its own field.
yeah,
uh, and so like if you have a team devoted to just UX, like the number of back end things they'd have to work on is going to get smaller and smaller as they start to work on more and more of that system that they're building, to be honest. And so it's like it's a double-edged sword, really, because like maybe for like maybe for most people working in Rails, right, like you want that full feature set and full stack mentality. um but yeah, as a larger entity, it just like becomes less and less attractive, or desire, like your need for it starts to thin out right after a certain point.
yeah.
So I don't know. The problem is like we need both.
Yep.
Like the I don't know, the desire for specialists is like kind of still important, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, it
you,
is.
you're still going to need somebody to work specifically on security at some point if that's part of your core business, right? And or if you have regulatory aspects of your business, you're going to have these specialists that are in demand no matter what. So I don't know that it's hard because like as a perfect example of like security, right? Like active record encryption is like awesome, right? And they had, when they were first releasing that, they had like a third party auditor come in and make sure that, all of the encryption stuff, because like nobody's working on encryption stuff specifically, on
Y-
the Rails core team. I mean, there are a handful of people that have knowledge of it, right?
Yep,
But they're not like working on the new algorithms.
yep, yeah. Yeah, that's probably
So,
murky territory. Yeah, I'd be worried if they were working on the algorithms.
right. Yeah, like what are they sneaking in, right? Like, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just reminds me of that. And to be honest, Adam Gordon Bell, he has this great podcast, the Co-Recursive podcast, and he had somebody on. They did this whole like dialogue, like reenacting that security incident recently that made it into the compiler kernels from some like Chinese co-conspirator, supposedly. Like they don't really know like too much of the details, but just like part of the I forget, was it the GNU compiler? It was something tangentially related to the assembly aspects of compiling,
Hmm.
where they were able to get like you know a I don't know, some kind of uh, like mutation to the or permutation to the compiling that like made it like inject code like with anything that was compiled with it.
Yep.
And that spread like crazy. It was just like a very interesting dialogue. But it makes
Yeah.
me think of this stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
what else is just like in there? There's no, I mean, you'd be selective of your contributors, but um I don't know. That's a like a long-winded thing about specialists, really. But like I don't think we should shy away from them. And the more we can keep things modular and accessible, the better that the framework will be. But
Yeah. I completely agree with all your points on specialists, and it's absolutely a good thing when you have someone who's gone really deep on, like, yeah, one aspect of maybe like front end or back end or whatever. But I also think that you shouldn't be completely unaware of the other thing. Like if you're a front end specialist and you're like ace at that, it shouldn't mean that you're afraid to create a model, a controller, a database migration, that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, sure, you may not be as good at it as someone who specializes in the back end, but I think you should be competent enough to be able to do the basics.
yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think having the tools and the framework that makes that easier to do, the better. Like
Yeah,
all these generators are great. I mean, to be honest, I would like to see some improvements there to the whole generator aspect of things and customization, which I know you already can do, but I don't know. It seems like not straightforward as a first time user on like what you can generate, what's available, like you know, that is definitely discoverability is definitely still a problem within the
yeah,
framework.
it
Uh,
is. Yeah,
which the guides are great. I'm so happy to see all the documentation, getting the tender love and care that it needs. But it's still like the discoverability problem is, even on the development side is still an issue. I don't know. What do you point people to that, like, let's say you're talking with somebody on the JavaScript side and you're like trying to convince them, hey, like it's not so hard. Like, what do you point them at?
yeah, it's a good question. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't know what to point them at. I'd probably look for a blog post. To be honest, I'd probably look for a step-by-step tutorial on how to like create a model or whatever. Because yeah, the Rails guides are very good, but they're also kind of aimed at someone who's actually trying to like learn Rails or is familiar with Rails, which is fine because you need to write for a certain target audience, otherwise nothing's ever going to make any sense. Uh, but yeah, if I'm talking to someone who's like more front end, he doesn't really know much about Rails, and unless they're like keen to really get into Rails, the guides is probably not where I would send them.
That makes somebody should go create a Ruby toolbox for Rails tutorials, right? I feel like there's value, so much value there.
They should just buy my book.
Yeah, or buy Ayush's book. Go ahead. In case you don't
So,
know, Ayush's book, the Hotwire
yeah,
Codex.
Rails and hotwirecodex.com. Go and buy it now.
Honestly, that book is so impressively like large and like covers all the topics you could possibly need. Like we should be pumping it out there because like honestly, if you have questions about that Hotwire framework, like it's in there. The answer is in there.
Yeah, and if it's not, you can email me.
Right, you'll add it
And you
to the list.
can demand, like, I demand that you write about this feature. I may not pay attention. I may not pay any attention to your demand, but you can write me if you want.
Oh, that's great. So what else do you feel like you're missing out on in Rails world?
I don't know. For me, I think conferences are just about networking. Uh, I don't necessarily miss any of the talks because I just catch up on YouTube afterwards. Most conferences these days put their talks on YouTube. The main reason I kind of wish I was there is the networking aspect, especially as a freelancer. It's kind of key. But yeah, like again, as a freelancer, getting over to Toronto and paying for I think it was like $500, $600 ticket on top of hotels and flights. It's just like, and then the opportunity cost of lost income, because if I go, it'll be probably a week, and that's 1 week of income lost. You're looking at, when you combine everything, you're probably looking at closer to like $5,000, and it's like, do I really want to spend that much? Like, I'm going. I'm going to New Zealand for 6 weeks at the end of the year, and I'm probably spending about £6,000 for that entire trip for 6 weeks.
Yeah, you're in the European region too, which has so many great conferences.
Yeah,
So, I understand totally. I actually have FOMO myself about all those great conferences that are there that I just probably won't ever get to.
yeah, they really got like I think I'd give a shout out to friendly.rb where I spoke last year. I couldn't, it was last week. I couldn't go this year just because the dates didn't work for me. I had another trip planned. But yeah, if anyone's looking to get over to Europe, that's probably one. And I'm speaking at Haggis Ruby next month as well. That's the first year of that conference in Edinburgh. So that should be fun because Ollie, who we had on this show, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, he's a speaker as well. So I'm sure that'll be a good conference as well.
Yeah, Edinburgh is beautiful too.
Yeah, it's a lovely city. I love going there.
Well,
But
we've talked about so much here.
yeah, I think we've covered everything that we know of at this point that has
We're
been
gonna have to
announced.
have some follow up talks with some of the co creators here.
Yeah, I think we
You know,
should. I think we really need to get Rosa on to talk about Solid Q,
I
and
love that.
yeah, and I think we should get someone. I don't. I think it's Donald who handles a lot of the Kamal stuff. I'd love to get him on and chat Kamal with him.
Yeah, we'll have to
So
schedule that.
yeah, got a
I'm
couple
sure
of
there's
names.
so many great insights there. What's coming out.
Yeah,
It's hard to use it all. Right away. So it'd be good to
yeah,
expose kind of how it all works and how you can
yeah,
benefit from it because I want to know.
yeah. Exactly. Like um, sometimes the best way is just to have like a couple of idiots like us just ask stupid questions uh, to the expert, and that's how like other people can also learn. So definitely,
Yeah, totally.
yeah, worth getting them on.
All right. Well, Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today, Ish?
No, I think that covers it.
Awesome. Uh,
Mm.
well, let's move into our picks.
All
Do
right.
you want to go
So,
first, or you want me to?
yeah, I'll go first.
Go
So,
for
I'll do a musical pick and a movie pick. I think I don't have. Actually, I'll do a tech pick as well. So, I have a musical pick. I went to see a band called Big Big Train on Tuesday. They're like an English progressive rock band. To me, they kind of just embody England as a country. They're like the most English band you could ever have. They sing about like the history and the countryside, and they had one album which was like about a little bit about space exploration. They have a song called Apollo and Voyager and stuff. So yeah, they're like very. And the latest album has two songs about cricket. So they're about as English a band as you could possibly get.
That's great.
So I absolutely love them. They're a great live band as well. I believe they're over in America next year for a few shows in the spring. So if live music is your thing, I'd recommend checking them out. Uh, I recently saw a movie called See How They Run, which I just loved it. It's a twist on the whodunit genre. So it's kind of it the events take place around a performance of the play The Mousetrap, which itself is a good old fashioned whodunit written by Agatha Christie, which has been running here in London for something like 70 or 80 years or something silly like that. So the events of this movie take place around that performance, and it is just such a self aware and self deprecating movie. Like how Deadpool is self aware for superhero movies and kind of makes fun of itself. I think See How They Run is equally self aware to the whodunit genre and equally makes fun of itself. And I just love movies that are like that. It's like, yeah, we know we're full of shit and we're not going to make any pretense that we're not full of shit. It's some brilliantly written. So yeah, that's my movie pick. And yesterday I was just looking for some applications that would help me screen record and webcam record at the same time to do like a screencast or something if I just want to send a demo of something I'm doing to a friend. I couldn't find something that was like cheap, just that literally just did this one thing, which is record my screen and the webcam and give me a video file at the end. But then I found this app called CleanShot X or CleanShot 10. I don't know which one. But yeah, cleanshot.com. I haven't bought it yet, but it looks exactly like what I'm after. So if you're looking to record screencasts, CleanShot is probably a good way to go if you're on a Mac. Right, that's my picks.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check these out. Uh, so I have just a couple picks here. The Ruby AI Happy Hour is happening again in New York City. This time they're doing a demo night. So I'm excited to go to that. Actually giving a demo of a project I started called Podcast Buddy, which I hope to have on the show soon. But
Nice.
it's a little AI companion that can join and answer questions and transcribes the whole thing and summarizes events and things. So I'm pretty excited about demoing that. And I was hoping to get a fully offline version of it working, but you know the talk back aspect of it is like very much just like a speak command at this point to OS X or Mac. So
Okay.
it's like otherwise there's like servers involved and extra,
Yeah.
way too many dependencies to get the text to speech working just right.
Nah,
That's
simple is good. I like simple.
yeah. So check it out, Podcast Buddy. You can run it just in the command line, and it'll like transcribe your conversation. I use it for meetings too. It's great, fully offline transcription
Nice.
using Whisper CPP. Uh, and next to that, I was revisiting something. One of our projects at Doximity called Simple Kick. It's a job orchestration for Sidekick, and it's fantastic. It gives you like ways to run jobs in parallel and orchestrate many things at once and get callbacks when things are complete or if there's failures. It's super useful, and I would definitely recommend checking that out as well.
What's it called again?
Simple Kick, so simple and then KIQ,
Ah, okay, nice. Uh, cool.
and we build it
Yeah.
right on top of Sidekick itself. And it does require Sidekick Pro, but um,
Okay, yeah, I'm just looking at the README now because yeah, I was gonna say that my client, we pay for Sidekick Enterprise and we've got quite a lot of complex stuff around batching and callbacks and stuff like that. So I'll check this out. Maybe it can make life easier in some way or the other.
oh yeah, I mean, I have a few things working with this, and it makes the whole process just like so streamlined, and
Nice,
easy to reason about. Um, well, that's it for
amazing.
me. uh, I hope everybody out there is enjoying Rails World feed as much as we are, and hopefully we can get some of these some of these speakers lined up here and dig in some more on the details coming soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be great to get them on the show and pick their brains.
Yep.
All
All right.
right.
Well,
Well,
until next time, folks. Valentino out.
cheers. Take care, everyone.